Hey guys, today we're going to do a video on using degrees inside of a circle graph to get some information, okay? So here's the situation. 150 people were surveyed and some of the results are displayed on this circle graph. So question A asks us how many of the votes, so how many of the 150 votes went to option 1, and then for B, how many went to option 2. If you look at our circle graph, you'll notice that option 1 takes up a certain section of the circle, and down here we see a right angle. And we know that right angles coincide with 90 degrees, okay? Make sure that's clear. And then option 2, you can see, takes up 60 degrees worth of space on the circle. Now, before we go any further, I'll remind you that a full circle's worth of degrees is 360 degrees. And so we can use the fractions of the sections to kind of determine how many of the votes went to each section, okay? So for option 1, since that's part of it, it asks us how many votes went to option 1. Well, if option 1 takes up 90 degrees worth of area of the circle, then it takes up 90 degrees of the 360 degrees that are available, right? And so we can write that as a fraction. We can write that as 90 degrees out of a possible 360 degrees of area, okay? And ultimately, we want to find out this fraction of the circle's worth of votes, right? If it took up this fraction of the circle, then it took up this fraction of the votes, okay? So really, what we're being asked to calculate is this fraction of 150 votes, okay? Now, before we go any further, we could simply divide 90 by 360 using a calculator or long division, and then we could multiply through. However, I'd like to come up with a more sophisticated, let's say, strategy to kind of use our brains. And so what I'm going to ask you guys to do is to simplify this fraction down before we go through and multiply, and it'll make our work a lot easier. So if we look at 90 and 360, we can divide these two numbers by a plethora of factors, but we can divide them namely by 90, okay? We can divide them both by 90, and that'll simplify it right down to its simplest form. And so that brings us now to 90 divided by 90 is clearly 1, and 360 divided by 90 is 4. So we're looking at a quarter, which might have been evident from the diagram. We're looking at a quarter of the 150 votes, okay? So a quarter of the 150 votes, there are many different ways we can do this. We can change the fraction to a decimal. So the decimal form of a quarter is 0.25. And then anytime we see the word of, this applies in any situation. When we want a fraction of a number, we're multiplying through, okay? And so this is our first strategy. I would rather my students use the fraction to kind of go through its calculations. So when we see a quarter of 150, that can also be written as simply 150 divided by 4. For those of you in grade 8 math and higher, you know how to multiply a fraction by a whole number, but an easy way to understand it is simply to think 1/4 of 150 can be thought of as 150 divided into 4 sections, right? And so if we do that, we'll get 37.5 votes. And so we can round up, let's say, 38 votes, right? Once in a while, the numbers work out a little bit dicey, and we end up with a decimal in our solution, so we can just round to the nearest integer, okay? And for option 2, we can use a similar kind of strategy, might be a little bit less evident, because we have 60 degrees, and so the second option got 60 out of the 360 degrees that were possible to get, and so this fraction will be exactly the fraction of the votes that we got. So we're looking for this fraction of the 150 votes, okay? And again, you can do this in many different ways. I'm gonna ask you guys to think about simplifying down this fraction, and so then you can go through the process of dividing both numbers by different numbers. If you have to start off slow, that's totally fine. You can start off by dividing by 2, then dividing by 2 again, or dividing by 3, or dividing by 6, whatever you're comfortable with, whatever will slowly take you down to the simplest form of a fraction. That's what you should do. And as you get better and get more efficient and get more used to these kinds of questions, you'll become more efficient with simplifying your fractions. And eventually you'll get to the point where you'll notice that 60 and 360 are both divisible by 60, which is going to make our lives a lot easier because we'll have our simplified fraction in just one step. And so 60 divided by 60 is clearly 1, and 360 divided by 60 is 6. And so now we're looking at 1/6 of the votes, or 1/6 of 150. And so again, you can convert this to a decimal, like we did up here, and then multiply, or you can think, well, 1/6 of 150 simply means 150 divided into six groups, right? So if we divide 150 into 6 groups, 150 divided by 6, you might be able to do this in your head. It might take you a second or two, but that's okay. And you'll come up with the answer of 25 votes, okay? And so, there we have it. So, rounding, we got 38 votes for option 1, we got 25 votes for option 2, which makes sense because option 2 is a smaller section of the circle graph than option 1 is, and so at least that's in line with our solution. And then if we wanted to, we could add all the other options that kind of finish off the 150 votes. But for now, I think this is enough to kind of get the point across, so I hope this helps. If you guys have any comments, suggestions, questions, please let me know. Requests for future videos, always appreciated, and thanks for watching.